Hello friends again, welcome back to Shadows of Revenge. First at all, tell me, where are you from the world watching my video? This is a true story, so watch till end. My name is Warren Pute. The house in Adina had learned how to be quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that settles after a long day, but the kind that presses against your ears, that reminds you someone used to be there and no longer is. The refrigerator hummed. The old clock in the hallway ticked with stubborn persistence. Everything else waited. Warren Pute sat alone at the small kitchen table, the same table where his wife Patricia used to sort mail, and scold him gently for leaving coffee rings on the wood. The calendar on the wall still read December, the 28th circled in red pen, though he couldn't remember why he'd circled it in the first place. Maybe hope had written it there before memory could erase the reason. His phone lay face down beside his mug, screen dark, silent. It had rung earlier that day. It always rang for practical reasons now. Logistics, clarifications, never invitations. When Landon called at 3 in the afternoon, his voice had been smooth, distracted, efficient. The same voice he used with clients he didn't intend to keep. Hey, Dad. Quick thing. Quick things were never quick. They were carefully rehearsed. New Year's Eve is kind of different this year, Landon continued. Client-facing. Investors. High profile. You know how it is. We need everyone to be polished. Polished. Warren understood the word immediately. It meant, you don't belong in the room anymore. I see, Warren had said, because he'd learned that resistance only prolonged the humiliation. There was relief on the other end of the line. A breath Landon hadn't realized he was holding. Great. We'll do something in January. Just us. Family dinner or something. Sure, Warren replied. Enjoy the party. The line went dead without a goodbye. Now, hours later, the house absorbed that silence and amplified it. Warren stood and began walking through the rooms, slowly, as if the walls might forget him if he moved too quickly. The living room was first. Framed photographs lined the shelves. Landon at 8 years old, missing a front tooth, holding a baseball too big for his hands. Isabel in her wedding dress, smiling wide and unafraid of the future. Family vacations. Birthdays. Moments frozen in time, before time decided to keep moving without him. In the corner stood Patricia's favorite armchair. The fabric had faded where the sun used to fall across it in the afternoons. Warren hadn't sat in it since the funeral. Some things felt like trespassing. He moved into his office. The walls were covered, not with degrees or awards, though he had those, but with crayon drawings. Bright suns, crooked houses, stick figures holding hands. Every single one signed in uneven letters. Love, Abigail. He stopped there longer than anywhere else. 23 drawings now. He knew the number because he'd counted them the night he ran out of wall space. He remembered taping the last one up and realizing there was nowhere left to put it, as if the room itself had decided it couldn't hold any more longing. Abigail was 8 when the drawings started arriving by mail. No return address. Just envelopes with her careful handwriting and a heart drawn next to his name. She never wrote letters. Just pictures, as if words were too fragile to survive the distance. He'd never told Landon about them. He suspected Landon didn't know. Warren's hand brushed the edge of one drawing. A stick figure park, 2 figures on a swing, labeled me and Grandpa. The tape had begun to curl. You shouldn't have to sneak, love, he murmured to the empty room. The bedroom came last. Patricia's reading glasses still sat on the nightstand where she'd left them 4 years earlier. He hadn't moved them. Not once. They were proof that she'd been real, that she hadn't simply dissolved into memory the way everything else seemed to. Her photo sat on his desk, Patricia in the garden, tomatoes in her hands, laughing at something he'd said. He couldn't remember the joke. Just the sound of her laugh, bright and sudden, like a window opening. I don't know if this is right, he told the photograph quietly, but I'm done pretending I don't see what's happening. The clock on the wall read 9:47 p.m. 3 days remained. For years earlier, the house had been loud. Sunday dinners had meant noise, overlapping conversations, the smell of pot roast filling every corner. Landon used to bring half-finished ideas and ask Warren what he thought, genuinely curious. Isabel would call from Minneapolis and complain about traffic. Abigail sprawled on the kitchen floor with crayons, holding up drawings like they were priceless art. Grandpa, look, it's you and me and a dinosaur. Patricia would watch from the stove, that small, knowing smile playing at her lips. Later, after everyone left and the dishes were stacked to dry, she'd sit beside Warren and say, "You still have it. That mind. Don't let it gather dust." She was talking about his work. For 32 years, Warren had worked at Hartwell Diagnostics. He'd helped build it from a modest clinic into a respected name in medical imaging. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. But his research was meticulous, his thinking years ahead of most people in the room. Patricia believed in it, even when corporate politics made him tired. She believed in him when he stopped believing in himself. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. No time to negotiate with hope. She died 6 months later on a Tuesday morning in October, holding his hand. The room smelled like antiseptic and fading breath. At the graveside, Abigail, only 5 then, stood beside him, her small fingers wrapped tightly around his. When the casket was lowered, she looked up at him with Patricia's eyes and asked, "Is she cold?" He had no answer. For a while after the funeral, the phone rang often. Grief pulled people together, briefly. But grief is impatient. It doesn't like staying where it's uncomfortable. The calls grew shorter, less frequent. At Hartwell, Landon started talking over him in meetings. "Dad's methods are solid, but we need to modernize," Landon would say, glancing around the room as if Warren weren't there, as if he were already retired, already irrelevant. Isabel's calls turned into texts. "Busy, Dad. Can we talk later?" Later never came. Warren found himself alone in the Adena house more nights than not. Patricia's garden grew wild. He didn't have the heart to tend it. When she died, something in the family died too. Or maybe her presence had simply been holding everything together. Without her, the fractures became visible. 2 years after Patricia's death, something changed. It was March 2nd, early morning. The house was dark except for the glow of Warren's computer screen and the desk lamp Patricia had given him 20 years earlier. He'd been working for months on an idea that refused to leave him alone, an algorithm designed not just to read diagnostic images, but to see them, to recognize patterns doctors missed, to catch diseases early, diseases like the one that took Patricia. That night, the code finally locked into place. The logic aligned. The system worked. Warren leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen, heart pounding. Patricia's photo watched from the corner of his desk, her smile frozen in time. "This is it," he whispered. "This is what you believed I could do." For the first time in 2 years, the ache loosened its grip. Purpose returned. He reached for his phone and called Landon. It was 2 in the morning. "Dad, it's late," Landon answered, voice thick with sleep. "I know," Warren said, barely containing himself. "But I've had a breakthrough. A real one. This algorithm, it could save thousands of lives." There was a pause. Then Landon's voice sharpened. "Tell me more." Warren told him everything. He didn't know then that this call, this moment of shared excitement, would become the beginning of his erasure. What followed felt like progress. Consulting meetings, strategy sessions, investor pitches where Warren sat in the back while Landon spoke confidently at the front, presenting ideas that sounded familiar because they were his. Helping with technical groundwork, Landon called it. At Thanksgiving, Warren sat at the far end of a long table while venture capitalists occupied the center. Isabel worked the room with practiced smiles. When someone asked about Hartwell's origins, she said, "Our father founded the company years ago, back when diagnostics was all analog." Years ago. Analog. Like he belonged to a museum. A woman in a tailored suit turned to Warren. "You must be proud." Before he could answer, Landon cut in. "Dad's methods were very traditional. We've modernized things." The room smiled with him. Abigail tugged Warren's sleeve. "Grandpa, why do you look sad?" He left before dessert. 6 months later, the conference room confrontation happened. The demands. The NDA. The accusation that family loyalty meant surrender. "Family doesn't steal from family," Warren said, his hands shaking as he stood. Isabel flushed. "You're being unreasonable." He walked out, and slowly, methodically, they began removing him from the picture. Emails stopped. Meetings happened without him. Invitations disappeared. Birthdays passed unnoticed. Social media filled with photos of celebrations he hadn't known about. He wasn't even being excluded loudly. He was being forgotten. Back in the present, Warren returned to the kitchen and sat at the table again. He looked at the clock. 3 days. He wasn't planning revenge. He was preparing to stop disappearing. The phone remained silent. But silence, he had learned, was never neutral. It always chose a side. He exhaled slowly, folded Abigail's latest drawing carefully, and placed it in his desk drawer with the others. Hidden, protected, waiting. The truth was coming, and it would not ask permission. The first warning sign wasn't the betrayal. It was how normal everything felt while it was happening. Betrayal, Warren would later understand, rarely announces itself with raised voices or slammed doors. It arrives quietly, dressed as opportunity, wrapped in trust, smiling like family. After the confrontation in the glass conference room, the one that felt more like a deposition than a conversation, Warren drove home on autopilot. The recording app on his phone was still running, though he didn't realize it until he pulled into his driveway and the engine ticked itself cool. He sat there for several minutes, hands resting uselessly on the steering wheel, replaying Landon's words in his head. "We need the full algorithm. You signed an NDA. We're family. Family." The word had been used like a lever, something to apply pressure with. Warren turned the phone over in his hand, saw the red recording dot, and felt something harden in his chest. Not anger. Clarity. Minnesota was a one-party consent state. He didn't need permission to protect himself. That realization didn't bring relief. It brought grief. Because if he needed protection from his own children, something had already gone terribly wrong. Over the next weeks, the erasure accelerated. Emails he'd once been copied on simply stopped arriving. Strategy meetings happened without notice. When Warren asked Landon about it, his son smiled. The same smooth, practiced smile he used on investors. "We're streamlining decision-making, Dad. Don't take it personally." Everything was personal when it was your life's work. Then came the dinners. Isabel's birthday in July. Warren learned about it 3 days later from a photograph online. A candlelit restaurant, champagne glasses raised, everyone smiling. Landon's anniversary in August followed the same pattern. He scrolled through the images slowly, studying faces, searching for some sign of hesitation, some flicker of guilt. There was none. They weren't hiding him. They weren't even thinking about him. The social media posts hurt more than he expected. Team-building retreats, board dinners, company milestones, captions like "grateful for this incredible team," and "surrounded by the people who matter most." Warren had built Hartwell from a 2-room clinic in Rochester. His name was on the original incorporation papers. Now he wasn't even in the frame. The hardest part wasn't the professional humiliation. It was Abigail. Landon stopped bringing her by. When Warren called to ask why, Landon answered with casual indifference. "She's busy with school. We'll figure something out." They never did. But children are honest in ways adults forget how to be. The drawings started arriving again. At first, one every few weeks. Then more frequently. Crayon portraits of the two of them. A house with 2 stick figures labeled Grandpa and me. No return address. Just envelopes slipped quietly into the mail. Warren taped every single one to his office wall. By September, he ran out of space. One afternoon, Landon posted a photo online. Him, Isabel, and Abigail at a Twins game. Abigail was smiling, holding a foam finger almost as big as her arm. The caption read, "My whole world." Warren stared at the photo for 20 minutes before realizing tears were running down his face. She looked happy. That was what mattered. But happiness built on erasure left a bitter taste. The email arrived in August. The subject line was simple. "You should see this." The sender was Russell Peton, a name Warren didn't recognize. The signature read First Venture Capital, Minneapolis. Warren opened the attachment. 23 slides. Hartwell Diagnostics' proprietary AI framework. His stomach dropped. Slide by slide, diagram by diagram, phrase by phrase, it was his work. His architecture. His logic. His language. Not inspired by. Not adapted. Copied. Word for word. He pulled up his patent filing. March 15th, 2022. He laid the documents side by side on his desk, the glow of the screen illuminating the room like a crime scene. Identical. Landon had pitched it to 3 venture capital firms in August of 2023, 5 months after Warren had legally protected the algorithm. 5 months after he'd trusted his son. Warren called Dr. Beverly Tom that night. She arrived without hesitation, glasses perched on her nose, coat still on as she read through the documents. This isn't ambiguity, she said quietly. This is theft. He waited for the rationalization, the softened language, the suggestion to keep the peace. Instead, she looked at him and said, "Silence protects abusers, even when they're your children." That was the moment Warren stopped hoping things would resolve themselves. September became a month of preparation. He reached out to Colin and Lauren, two researchers he'd mentored years earlier at the University of Minnesota. They met in a small office that smelled faintly of dry erase markers and ambition. Warren laid everything out: the patent, the recordings, the pitch decks. They didn't hesitate. They agreed to co-found a new company with him, Neural Diagnostics. It felt strange to say the name out loud, like naming something that had been waiting to exist all along. They filed for IPO in October. Target launch, January 1st, 2025. Midnight. In November, Amanda Grayson from Forbes reached out. Someone had tipped her off. Warren met her at a coffee shop in Stillwater, a quiet place with large windows and no background music. He brought everything: patents, emails, recordings, corroboration from Dr. Ton, Russell's pitch deck. Amanda took notes for 2 hours without interrupting. Finally, she looked up. "This will be national coverage, but we'll embargo it until midnight on New Year's. So they won't know," Warren said slowly, "until everyone knows." She nodded. "Once this is public, there's no going back." "They already took everything," he replied. "I'm just taking the truth back." December arrived with a final insult. The text came on December 3rd. "Just immediate family this year. From Isabel." No greeting. No explanation. 8 words that erased him from Christmas. Warren stared at his phone for a long time before typing back. "I am your family." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "You know what I mean. Maybe next year. Maybe next year." He looked at the calendar on the kitchen wall. 22 days until Christmas. Last year had been the first without Patricia. He'd burned the ham, forgotten the cranberry sauce, served store-bought rolls that tasted like cardboard. Abigail had loved it anyway. She'd made him a construction paper star for the tree, covered in glitter he was still finding months later. "This is the best Christmas ever," she'd said, "because Grandpa tried really hard." This year, he wasn't invited. He took the drawing off the refrigerator, 3 stick figures under a triangle tree, folded it carefully, and placed it in his desk drawer with the others. 23 drawings, hidden like secrets. From December 3rd to the 27th, Warren watched from the outside. Landon posted photos from Hartwell's Christmas party: champagne towers, string quartets, a downtown venue glowing with excess. Abigail appeared in one photo wearing a red velvet dress, holding a gingerbread cookie bigger than her hand. She looked older, taller. He hadn't seen her in person since June. On December 14th, Warren met with Duncan Prescott one last time. The lawyer closed his briefcase slowly after reviewing the stack of documents. "Airtight," he said. On December 20th, Warren emailed Amanda. Subject line: "I'm ready." Body: "Publish it." He hovered over the send button for 5 minutes before clicking it. On December 27th, he met his oldest friend, Stanley Kowalski, at Pete's Diner in Stillwater. The place smelled like coffee and bacon grease and decades of the same menu. "You sure you can live with the fallout?" Stanley asked quietly. Warren watched steam rise from his mug. "Can I live with the silence?" Stanley didn't answer. Neither did Warren. December 28th arrived. At 3 p.m., Landon called. "Hey, Dad. Quick thing." The same phrase. The same tone. "New Year's Eve is a client event this year. Big investors. We need everyone to be polished." Warren felt a familiar dismissal settle into his bones. "I understand," he said. "Great. We'll do something in January." "Sure." Landon hung up. No goodbye. No apology. That night, Warren walked through the house room by room, as if committing it to memory. The living room. The office. Walls of crayon love. The bedroom. Patricia's glasses untouched. He stopped at his desk, staring at the patent certificate framed in black. March 15th, 2022. The day he protected his life's work from his own children. "I'm done being erased," he whispered to Patricia's photo. The clock read 9:47 p.m. 3 days until the truth. Outside, the world moved on, unaware that a reckoning was already in motion. Inside, Warren sat alone, no longer invisible, just waiting. New Year's Eve arrived without ceremony. No snowstorm. No dramatic sky. Just a cold, ordinary evening that felt heavier than it should have. The kind of night where time stretches, where minutes feel deliberate, almost aware of their importance. Warren sat alone at the kitchen table in the Adina house, the same table that had witnessed decades of ordinary life, meals, arguments, reconciliations, laughter. Now it held only his laptop, a mug of coffee gone untouched, and the quiet weight of a decision that had been building for years. Across the room, the television played silently. Times Square glowed with artificial joy. Crowds pressed together, counting down a future that still believed in clean beginnings. The house lights were off. Not intentionally. He just hadn't turned them on. On his laptop screen, 2 tabs remained open. One was the Forbes article, embargoed, polished, devastating. The headline sat there like a held breath, waiting for release. Names spelled correctly. Dates aligned. Patents verified. Recordings transcribed. There was no rage in it, no bitterness. Just facts. Cold. Precise. Unforgiving. The other tab showed the IPO dashboard for Neural Diagnostics. Everything was ready. Timed. Programmed. At 12:01 a.m., it would go live. Truth and consequence, scheduled down to the minute. Warren leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He thought about Tyler, the young researcher at Hartwell who'd sent him a quiet note of support months earlier. "I believe you," the message had said. "I just can't say it out loud." Tyler had a pregnant wife, a mortgage, a life that depended on a company built on lies he didn't create. If Hartwell collapsed, people like Tyler would fall with it. The thought tightened Warren's chest. He wasn't trying to destroy a company. He wasn't even trying to punish his children. He was trying to exist, to stop being erased while still alive. But truth didn't arrive gently. It arrived like gravity. The clock on the wall read 11:15 p.m. Warren moved his cursor over the email draft addressed to Amanda Grayson. One word would stop everything. Stop. He could still choose silence. He could still protect the illusion. Let Landon keep the company. Let Isabel keep the image. Let Abigail grow up believing her grandfather had simply drifted away. He hovered there, finger trembling slightly on the mouse. Was he fixing something, or breaking it beyond repair? His eyes drifted to Patricia's photo on the desk. She didn't answer. She just smiled, frozen in a garden that no longer existed, holding tomatoes that had long since rotted back into the soil. The clock ticked to 11:30. The house felt smaller now, like it was leaning in to listen. Warren exhaled and sat forward, rubbing his hands together slowly. He told himself he would decide at midnight, that he would sit with it until the last possible second. That was when his phone buzzed. Not a notification. A call. Landon's name flashed on the screen. Warren stared at it, surprised more than anything. His first instinct was not hope. It was caution. Landon hadn't called without an agenda in a long time. He almost let it ring out. Then he answered. "Dad." The voice wasn't Landon's. It was smaller, softer, uncertain. "Grandpa." Warren's throat closed instantly. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, pressing the phone to his ear. "What are you doing up so late?" "I wanted to call and say Happy New Year," Abigail whispered. "I miss you." The words landed gently and shattered everything at once. "I miss you too," Warren said, his voice breaking despite his effort to steady it. "I miss you so much." "I wish I could hug you," she said. "Mom's busy talking to people." I went into the hallway. He could hear music in the background. Laughter. Glasses clinking. Somewhere across Minneapolis, his granddaughter was sneaking away from a party full of people who claimed to be her whole world, just to tell him she still loved him. "I made you a drawing," she continued. "A big one. It's you and me at the park. Mom said I couldn't mail it, but I'm going to anyway when she's not looking." Warren closed his eyes. Tears slid down his face unchecked. "I can't wait to see it," he said. "That sounds perfect." There was a sudden sharpness in the background. "Abigail, who are you talking to?" Celeste's voice. "Landon's wife." "I have to go," Abigail whispered urgently. "I love you, Grandpa." "I love you too, baby," Warren said. "Always." The line went dead. Warren sat there, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to nothing. She hadn't called to ask questions. She hadn't called to accuse or defend. She called because she missed him. The clock read 11:43 p.m. Warren opened his email. He typed 2 words, "Publish it," and pressed send. At 11:59, The television showed the final countdown. 10, 9, 8. The crowd roared. 7, 6, 5. Warren didn't look at the screen. 4, 3, 2, 1. Fireworks exploded over Times Square. Confetti fell. Strangers kissed. The year turned. Midnight. The laptop remained still. For 60 seconds, nothing happened. Then, at 12:01 a.m., Warren's phone lit up like a small sun. Emails, texts, notifications, missed calls. The Forbes article was live. The IPO went public. Neural Diagnostics debuted at a valuation of $2.5 billion. The truth was out. At 12:03, his phone rang again. Landon. Warren answered. What the hell did you do? Landon's voice was raw, panicked. Music still thumped in the background, but now it was chaos. Voices overlapping, confusion spreading. I documented the truth, Warren said calmly. You humiliated us, Landon snapped. On New Year's Eve, in front of everyone. If the truth humiliates you, Warren replied evenly, ask yourself why. Another voice cut in, Isabel's. Sharp, furious. We're going to sue you for defamation, she said. You've destroyed us. Duncan reviewed everything, Warren said. You don't have a case. You're a selfish, bitter old man. Isabel spat. The line went dead. They'd hung up on him. Warren sat in the dark, the glow of his phone illuminating his hands. It was over. Whatever version of family he'd been clinging to had collapsed under the weight of truth. By 1 a.m., he had 53 missed calls. By 2 a.m., over 2,000 messages. He stopped answering. At 3 a.m., he turned his phone off and lay in bed staring at the ceiling until the sun rose. January 2nd, 10 a.m., Landon held a press conference. Warren watched it live on his laptop, coffee growing cold beside him. His son looked smaller somehow. Tie crooked, eyes red, voice unsteady. A reporter asked about the patent timeline. March 2022 versus August 2023. Landon stumbled. Tried to pivot. Spoke about collaboration. Family development. Shared ideas. Another reporter cut in. Did you attempt to sell your father's patented algorithm to venture capital firms 5 months after he filed his patent? Landon froze, looked off camera, and walked off the stage. The clip went viral by noon. At 4 p.m., Hartwell's board chair released a statement. Landon Pute suspended pending independent investigation. Effective immediately. On January 3rd, Russell Petton sent his full file to Forbes. Every email, every pitch deck, every meeting. Amanda published the follow-up article. It was worse than Warren had imagined. January 4th, the Cleveland Clinic terminated their $18 million partnership with Hartwell, citing ethical concerns. Hartwell's stock dropped 31%. Trading was halted twice. That was when the messages from employees began arriving. One stood out. Tyler Jameson. I have 2 kids and a mortgage. I know this isn't your fault, but I'm terrified. Half the lab is getting laid off. Warren read the message 5 times. Victory tasted like ash. He responded immediately. Offered references. Shared contacts. Promised Neural Diagnostics was hiring. It wasn't enough. Sorry never was. At 2:47 a.m., another message appeared. Can we talk? Landon. Warren stared at the phone in the dark bedroom. Patricia's reading glasses still sat untouched on the nightstand. He didn't reply. The reckoning had happened. The cost was still unfolding. And silence, this time, was his choice. Silence returned in fragments. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet that had filled the Adina house before New Year's Eve, but a different kind. Sharp, broken, interrupted by notifications Warren no longer opened and headlines he no longer needed to read. The truth had been released into the world, and now it moved without him, carried by strangers, reshaped by opinion, amplified by outrage. Warren kept his phone face down on the kitchen counter. For the first few days, he moved through the house slowly, deliberately, as if sudden movements might trigger regret. Morning light crept through the windows. Coffee brewed. The clock kept time. Ordinary things insisted on continuing. But nothing felt ordinary. On January 2nd, Landon's press conference replayed everywhere. Warren watched it once, just once, then closed the laptop. He didn't need to see his son unravel publicly to know what had happened. He'd heard it in Landon's voice the night before. Panic stripped of confidence. Control slipping. By noon, the clip of Landon freezing on stage had gone viral. By evening, the narrative had solidified. There was no ambiguity left to argue over. The next day, the follow-up article landed harder. Russell Petton's documents filled in the gaps Warren hadn't wanted to imagine. Not just one pitch, not just one firm, multiple meetings, repeated attempts, a pattern. Landon hadn't panicked and made a mistake. He'd planned. That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself, because planning required time, and time required justification. Stories Landon must have told himself about legacy, about entitlement, about how his father would eventually understand. Warren sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wood grain for a long time, letting that truth settle where excuses used to live. On January 4th, the Cleveland Clinic ended its partnership with Hartwell Diagnostics. The press release was careful, restrained, devastating. Ethical concerns, leadership instability. Hartwell's stock collapsed. The messages from employees came quietly at first. One or two, then more. Fear has a tone. Warren could hear it even through text. He answered every message he could, offered references, introductions, reassurances that neurodiagnostics was expanding, that there were places for good people who had been caught in someone else's ambition. But every message carried weight. Every life disrupted was a reminder that truth, once released, didn't discriminate between guilty and innocent. It rolled outward, flattening everything in its path. At night, Warren lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. He thought about Tyler's message, about the kids whose parents would come home early with boxes in their hands, about how many people would curse his name without ever knowing his. This was the cost no one warned you about. Justice didn't arrive clean. It arrived messy and loud and indifferent to intention. The text came at 2:47 a.m. Can we talk? Landon. Warren didn't reply. Another message followed the next morning. Dad, please. Just 5 minutes. Warren deleted it. January 10th became January 11th. More messages appeared. Apologies tangled with desperation. Guilt mixed with fear. Warren tried not to read between the lines. Tried not to imagine Landon pacing an unfamiliar apartment, staring at a phone the way Warren once had. On January 12th, the phone rang at 8 a.m. Warren almost didn't answer. Then a thought cut through him, sharp and sudden. Abigail. He picked up. Dad. Landon's voice was hoarse, worn thin by sleepless nights. Thank you for answering. Warren didn't speak. I'm sorry, Landon said after a pause. I don't know if that means anything to you. Why now? Warren asked, his voice steady in a way that surprised him. Because you got caught. Because you lost everything. Silence. Both, Landon admitted. But also because I finally see what I did. Not just the patent. Everything else. The dinners. Christmas. Making you invisible. Warren closed his eyes. You didn't just steal my work, he said quietly. You erased me. From my own life. From my granddaughter's life. I know, Landon said, his voice breaking. I don't know how to fix this. You can't, Warren replied. You can only own it. Another long pause. What does that mean? It means you tell the truth publicly, Warren said. Not because a lawyer tells you to. Not because the board is watching. Because it's the truth. They'll fire me permanently, Landon said. I'll never work in this industry again. Warren thought of the choice he'd faced at 11:43 p.m. on New Year's Eve. Then you'll know how it feels to choose between silence and integrity, he said. The same choice you forced me to make. The line went quiet, long enough that Warren thought the call had dropped. Then Landon spoke. Okay. Warren said nothing. I'll do it, Landon continued. I'll tell the truth. Good, Warren replied. They hung up. On January 15th, Landon posted his statement. Warren read it alone at the kitchen table, coffee cooling beside him. There was no PR polish, no legal hedging, just words that sounded like they'd been dragged out of somewhere deep and uncomfortable. Landon admitted everything. The pitch decks, the investor meetings, the attempt to claim the algorithm as Hartwell's proprietary work, the humiliation, the erasure. He took full responsibility. He resigned from all positions. Permanent. No conditions. The comments section exploded. Support. Condemnation. Skepticism. Praise. Rage. Warren closed the laptop after finishing the statement. He didn't feel relief. He didn't feel victory. He felt tired. He sent Landon a private message. It's a start. Nothing more. Healing, Warren had learned, didn't look like reconciliation. It looked like boundaries. It looked like truth without guarantees. Life continued. In February, Warren stood on a stage in Chicago at the Medical Innovation Conference. 2,000 people filled the hall. He spoke about ageism in tech, about intellectual property, about the danger of silence. When he finished, the room stood. The applause echoed longer than he expected. Afterward, messages poured in. Researchers, founders, people he'd never met. You gave me permission to stand up for myself. I'm filing my patent tomorrow. Thank you for proving age doesn't mean obsolete. In March, Neural Diagnostics announced a $60 million partnership with a Cleveland clinic. Dr. Clifford Manning called personally. This technology is going to save lives, he said. That's what matters. Warren believed him. In April, he met Landon for coffee at the Stillwater Diner, the same place he'd sat with Stanley months earlier. The conversation wasn't warm. It wasn't easy, but it was honest. Landon talked about therapy, about starting over, about how success felt hollow without integrity. He asked about Abigail. Warren said yes. Not for him. For her. The year unfolded differently than Warren had imagined. Neural Diagnostics grew. Colin and Lauren hired 50 researchers. Tyler Jameson was one of them. He shook Warren's hand one afternoon and said, "Thank you." Just that. December returned. On December 31st, 2025, 1 year later, Warren stood in the same house in Edina. But this time it wasn't quiet. Colin and Lauren were there. Dr. Ton, Stanley, Duncan, Amanda, people who had chosen truth over comfort. People who saw him. At 11:58 p.m., glasses were raised. To second chances, Colin said. To truth, Lauren added. Stanley looked at Warren. To the family we choose. Warren felt something settle in his chest. Not happiness exactly. Peace. At midnight, fireworks echoed faintly in the distance. They clinked glasses. His phone buzzed at 12:14 a.m. An email notification. Subject. Can I call you? Sender. Abigail Pute. His hand shook. He opened it. Hi, Grandpa. Dad said I could video call you if you want. I miss you. Love, Abigail. Warren stepped in the next room and answered. The screen lit up. There she was. Older. Taller. Patricia's eyes. Hi, Grandpa. Warren swallowed hard. Hi, sweetheart. She held up a drawing. 2 stick figures under a tree. This is us at the park, she said. Do you remember? I remember, Warren said, smiling through tears. Tell me about it. She talked. He listened. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It didn't promise happy endings. But it started with truth. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it started with a video call from someone who never stopped loving you. Warren looked at the screen and felt it. Not triumph, not revenge. Just the quiet certainty that he was no longer invisible, and never would be again.